The Zephyrian council chambers hummed with the quiet efficiency of 1,000 species conducting business across the galaxy. Ambassador Kethvar of the Hegemony adjusted his ceremonial robes, the crystalline fragments woven into the fabric catching the artificial light from 3 different suns streaming through the massive viewport. Today marked the 500th cycle since the Terran Accords, and he had come with a proposal that would reshape the balance of power forever. The humans sat in their designated section, a modest delegation of 12 representatives wearing simple dark suits that seemed almost primitive compared to the elaborate costumes surrounding them. Ambassador Sarah Chen, their lead diplomat, appeared unremarkable by galactic standards. No exotic features, no impressive physical modifications, no visible weapons or armor. Just a middle-aged woman with graying hair and tired eyes who had been negotiating treaties for longer than most species had been spacefaring. Kethvar found their simplicity amusing. The humans had been members of the galactic community for 5 centuries, yet they remained stubbornly unchanged. While other species enhanced themselves with technology, formed vast collectives, or transcended their physical forms, humans insisted on remaining exactly what they had always been. It made them predictable, he thought, manageable. "The motion before the council today," announced Speaker Vorth, their voice carrying across the chamber through quantum resonance, "concerns the proposed limitation of Terran mining rights in the outer spiral. Ambassador Kethvar of the Hegemony will present the case." Kethvar rose, his 4 arms spreading in a gesture of respectful acknowledgement. "Honored representatives, we gather today to address a matter of galactic security. For too long, we have allowed the Terrans unrestricted access to the volatile zones beyond the spiral arm. Their mining operations have destabilized entire star systems, their aggressive expansion threatens established trade routes, and their military buildup in those regions concerns us all." Murmurs of agreement rippled through several delegations. The Zephyrians nodded their crystalline heads, while the Morphic Collective pulsed in synchronized approval. Even the ancient Valorians, who rarely involved themselves in such matters, seemed to pay attention. Ambassador Chen did not react. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded, watching Kethvar with the same mild expression she had worn throughout the proceedings. Her silence irritated him more than any protest would have. "The Hegemony proposes," he continued, "that human mining operations be restricted to the inner systems, under proper supervision. We further propose that their military presence in the outer spiral be reduced by 70% within 2 standard cycles. This is not punishment, but prudent management of galactic resources and security." The chamber erupted in discussion. The economic implications were staggering. Human mining operations in the outer spiral produced nearly 40% of the rare elements that powered interstellar civilization. Their shipyards in those regions built vessels for dozens of species. The proposed restrictions would cripple not just human expansion, but the galactic economy itself. "The humans will never agree to this," stated Ambassador Trill of the Merchant Confederation, their bioluminescent patches flickering with concern. "Their entire colonial infrastructure depends on those operations." Kethvar smiled, a predatory expression that revealed rows of sharpened teeth. "Which brings us to the enforcement mechanism. The Hegemony, in alliance with the Zephyrian Empire and the Morphic Collective, is prepared to blockade all human shipping lanes until compliance is achieved. We represent 67% of galactic military capacity. Resistance would be futile." The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Even the most naive delegates understood what was being proposed. This was not a negotiation. It was an ultimatum backed by overwhelming force. The humans would be reduced to a minor regional power, confined to their original territory, dependent on the goodwill of their neighbors for survival. All eyes turned to Ambassador Chen. She had not moved during Kethvar's presentation, had not consulted with her colleagues, had not called for recess to contact Earth. She simply sat there, as if she had been expecting this moment for years. Finally, she stood. The chamber fell silent. "Thank you, Ambassador Kethvar, for that illuminating presentation," she said, her voice carrying clearly without technological amplification. "Before we proceed, I would like to share a brief historical reminder with the Council." She activated a small device, and a holographic display materialized above the assembly. It showed a star map of the galaxy, with various regions highlighted in different colors to represent territorial boundaries. 500 cycles ago, when humanity first encountered galactic civilization, we were given a choice. We could remain isolated in our small corner of space, or we could join the community under the Terran Accords. We chose cooperation. The map shifted, showing the gradual expansion of human presence throughout the galaxy. We have honored every treaty, respected every boundary, shared our discoveries, and contributed our resources to the common good. "Your point, Ambassador?" Kethvar interrupted, his patience wearing thin. Chen smiled, and something in that expression made several delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. "My point is that we have been very good neighbors, perhaps too good. It seems some of you have forgotten why the Terran Accords were written the way they were." She touched her device again, and the display changed to show an ancient document, its text glowing in formal council script. "Article 7 of the Terran Accords, unanimously ratified by all member species. No action shall be taken against human interests without full consultation and agreement of the Terran delegation. This provision reflects the unique circumstances of humanity's integration into galactic society and shall remain inviolate." "That was written 5 centuries ago," Kethvar scoffed, "when the galaxy was young and humans were an unknown quantity. Circumstances have changed. The balance of power has shifted. That antiquated clause no longer serves galactic interests." "You think it's antiquated?" Chen asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. "How interesting. Tell me, Ambassador, do you know why that clause was included in the first place?" Kethvar waved dismissively. "Ancient politics, fear of the unknown. The early council was overly cautious about integrating a new species." "No," Chen said quietly. "It was written by survivors." The holographic display shifted again, this time showing a different star map, one that looked subtly wrong. Several regions that should have been populated centers were marked in ominous black. "This is the galaxy as it existed 600 cycles ago, before humanity's first contact with the community," Chen explained. "Notice anything different?" A Zephyrian delegate leaned forward, studying the display. "The Ashanti sectors. They show inhabited systems, but those regions are empty space now. We always assumed they were mapping errors in the ancient records." "Not errors," Chen corrected. "Casualties." The chamber grew very quiet. Even the ambient hum of life support systems seemed to fade. 600 years ago, humanity was not a spacefaring civilization. We were confined to Earth, barely capable of reaching our own moon. We posed no threat to anyone. We didn't even know galactic civilization existed." Chen's voice remained calm, conversational, but every delegate was hanging on her words. "Unfortunately, we were discovered by a species called the Ashanti. They decided Earth would make a suitable colony world. The only problem was that it was already occupied. The implications hit the chamber like a physical blow. First contact, attempted extermination. The Ashanti had tried to commit genocide. The Ashanti were not particularly advanced by galactic standards," Chen continued. "Their weapons were adequate, their ships functional, their tactics conventional. They expected easy victory over a primitive species confined to a single world. They were wrong." She touched her device once more, and the display showed a timeline of conflict. Dates, battles, casualties. The numbers were staggering. The war lasted 37 years. In that time, humanity went from stone knives and bearskins to interstellar warships. We learned your technologies, improved upon them, and turned them against our enemies. The Ashanti called for help from their allies. We destroyed them too. They petitioned the galactic community for intervention. We eliminated anyone who aided them. The silence in the chamber was deafening. Every delegate was staring at the human delegation with new eyes, seeing them not as the harmless merchants and diplomats they appeared to be, but as the descendants of a species that had fought its way from planetary to galactic power in a single generation. By the time the war ended, Chen said, 17 species had been rendered extinct. 43 star systems had been sterilized. The Ashanti sectors became a dead zone that remains uninhabitable to this day. Galactic civilization had lost nearly 20% of its population and infrastructure. Kethvar's throat had gone dry. That's impossible. No species could cause that level of destruction, especially not a pre-spaceflight civilization. You're right, Chen agreed. No species could, but humans are not like other species. We don't fight wars the way you do. When threatened with extermination, we don't surrender, we don't negotiate, we don't retreat. We adapt, we overcome, and we ensure the threat can never arise again. She gestured to the star map, where the black zones seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. The survivors of that war founded the modern galactic community. They wrote the Terran Accords not to limit humanity, but to protect everyone else. Article 7 exists because they understood a fundamental truth. It is far safer to have humans as allies than as enemies. Ambassador Chen looked directly at Kethvar, and he felt something primitive and terrifying stir in his genetic memory. The galaxy's oldest rule is not written in any treaty or law. It exists in the collective unconscious of every species that lived through the Ashanti War. Never, under any circumstances, betray humanity. The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, delegates began to shift in their seats, to whisper among themselves, to reconsider everything they thought they knew. That was 6 centuries ago, Kethvar said finally, his voice lacking its earlier confidence. Humanity has changed. You've become civilized. You follow laws, respect treaties, engage in diplomacy. Chen smiled again, that same unsettling expression. Have we? 3 days after the council session, the hegemony fleet moved into position around the Terran trade routes. Admiral Zefkar commanded the operation from his flagship, the massive dreadnought Inevitable Conquest. Around him, nearly 2,000 vessels from 3 different species created an impenetrable barrier across every major shipping lane leading to human space. The blockade was perfect. Nothing could pass without their permission. Merchant vessels found themselves turned away, their cargo holds full of goods destined for human colonies. Mining ships carrying rare elements from the outer spiral sat motionless in space, their crews forbidden from proceeding to their destinations. The economic pressure on humanity would be overwhelming within weeks. Admiral Zefkar studied the tactical displays with satisfaction. The humans had exactly 37 ships in the immediate area, mostly cargo haulers and a few outdated patrol craft. Their nearest military base was 6 days away at maximum speed. Even if every human vessel in the galaxy converged on this position, they would still be outnumbered 50 to 1. "Admiral," reported his tactical officer, "we're receiving a transmission from the human merchant vessel, Trade Winds. They're requesting passage through the blockade." Zefkar activated the communication channel. The image of a human captain appeared on screen, a weathered woman with short gray hair and a professional expression. "Captain Morrison of the Trade Winds," she said without preamble. "We're carrying medical supplies to the Kepler colony. People are going to die if we don't reach them within 48 hours. "I regret the necessity, Captain," Zefkar replied. But the blockade remains in effect until your government agrees to the Council's terms. You are free to return to Terran space or dock with one of our supply stations until this matter is resolved." Captain Morrison was quiet for a moment. "Admiral, those supplies include organ transplant material for children, engineered tissue that will degrade within 60 hours. If we turn back now, 7 kids die." Something in her voice made Zefkar uncomfortable. Not pleading, not desperation, but a cold statement of fact delivered with the precision of someone calculating the cost of his decision. "The responsibility for their deaths lies with your government, not mine," he said finally. "If Earth agrees to the mining restrictions, the blockade ends immediately." "I see." Morrison's expression didn't change. "Then you're choosing to kill children to make a political point." "I'm enforcing a legal decision of the Galactic Council." "No, Admiral. You're breaking the galaxy's oldest rule." The transmission ended. Zefkar stared at the blank screen for several minutes. Something about that conversation bothered him, though he couldn't identify exactly what. The human had been too calm, too accepting. Most species would have raged, pleaded, or tried to negotiate. Morrison had simply acknowledged his position and stated the consequences. Over the next 18 hours, 14 more human vessels approached the blockade. Each captain was polite, professional, and utterly emotionless as they explained their cargo and requested passage. Medical supplies, food shipments, emergency equipment, industrial components needed to maintain life support systems on remote colonies. Each time, Zefkar denied their requests. Each time, the human captains accepted his decision with the same unsettling calm. By the second day, reports were coming in from across the galaxy. Human shipping had stopped completely. Not just in the blockaded zones, but everywhere. Every human-flagged vessel in space had simply shut down their engines and refused to move. Cargo worth trillions of credits sat motionless while their crews waited for orders. "It's a negotiating tactic," Kethvar assured the Admiral during their scheduled briefing. "They're trying to put pressure on their trading partners. It won't last long. The economic losses are too severe." Zefkar wasn't so sure. The humans hadn't demanded anything, hadn't threatened anyone, hadn't even issued a formal protest. They had simply stopped. Every merchant ship, every transport, every cargo hauler in the galaxy had gone silent at exactly the same time. The level of coordination required was staggering. "Sir," interrupted Communications Officer Veltar, "we're receiving priority transmissions from the Merchant Confederation. They're reporting massive disruptions to shipping schedules throughout the galaxy." The tactical display updated to show the scale of the problem. Red indicators marked disabled supply lines across dozens of star systems. The humans didn't just operate their own merchant fleet. They provided shipping services for hundreds of species who couldn't afford to maintain their own interstellar vessels. "Food shipments to the outer colonies have stopped," Veltar continued. "Medical supplies, industrial equipment, even luxury goods. The Confederation estimates that 40% of galactic commerce has ground to a halt." Admiral Zefkar felt the first stirring of unease. This was more than a labor strike. This was a coordinated shutdown of critical infrastructure. Within hours, the situation deteriorated further. Human-operated mining facilities in 12-star systems had ceased operations. Power plants providing energy to non-human colonies had shut down their reactors. Space stations offering refueling and repair services had closed their docking bays. Even the massive orbital farms that fed billions of people across the galaxy had suspended food shipments. "They're cutting life support to entire worlds," Veltar reported, his voice tight with concern. "The Centauri colonies are reporting critical shortages. The Kepler system is already on emergency ratios." Kethvar's confident expression was beginning to crack. "This is economic terrorism. The Council won't stand for it." "Actually," said a new voice, "the Council is having difficulty meeting." Everyone on the bridge turned to see Ambassador Chen materializing in their holographic communication chamber. She appeared calm and composed, as if she were discussing the weather rather than galactic catastrophe. "How did you breach our secured channels?" Zefkar demanded. "We didn't breach anything, Admiral. We built them. Human contractors designed and installed the communication networks for roughly 80% of the galactic fleet. We also maintain the power systems, navigation computers, and life support equipment for most non-human vessels." Chen smiled pleasantly. "It turns out that 5 centuries of being helpful has put us in some rather interesting positions." The implications hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. Humans weren't just merchants and miners. They were the invisible foundation that kept galactic civilization functioning. They fixed things, transported things, built things, maintained things. They were everywhere, and nobody had bothered to keep track of exactly how dependent everyone else had become on their services. "What do you want?" Kethvar asked, appearing on an adjacent hologram. "Want? Nothing, Ambassador. We're simply no longer providing services to species that have declared economic war against us. It seems reasonable, doesn't it?" "This is blackmail," Zefkar stated. "No, Admiral, this is consequences. You chose to strangle our economy, so we've chosen to remove ourselves from yours. Think of it as an involuntary divorce." Chen gestured, and the holographic display updated to show the current state of galactic infrastructure. Nearly half of all systems were showing critical failures. Space stations were rationing power, colonies were running out of food. Industrial centers couldn't obtain the raw materials needed to manufacture essential goods. "The beautiful thing about economic interdependence," Chen observed, "is how efficiently it works when everyone cooperates. The terrible thing is how quickly it collapses when someone decides to break the system." "You're killing billions of innocent people," Kethvar accused. "Are we? Let me check." Chen consulted a small device. "According to our records, human-operated medical facilities are still treating patients. Human agricultural stations are still producing food. Human power plants are still generating energy. Human transport vessels are still carrying emergency supplies to critical areas. We're just not doing any of that for species that have declared themselves our enemies." The cold logic was irrefutable. Humans weren't attacking anyone or destroying anything. They were simply refusing to maintain the very systems that their enemies depended on to survive. "The Ashanti War," Zefkar said suddenly, understanding flooding through him. "You're fighting the same way you did 600 years ago." Chen nodded approvingly. "Very good, Admiral. Most species fight by applying force against their enemies. Humans fight by removing the things their enemies need to survive. It's much more efficient. But the economic damage to your own people will be severe," Chen acknowledged. "But humans are remarkably good at surviving hardship. We spent most of our evolutionary history struggling against hostile environments with inadequate resources. A few years of economic isolation won't kill us. The question is whether the same can be said for species that have grown dependent on our support." The holographic display updated again, showing projections of system failures over the next few weeks. Food shortages would begin within days. Power grid failures would follow within a week. Complete societal collapse in the affected regions would occur within a month. "This is madness," Kethvar whispered. "You're destroying galactic civilization." "We're defending ourselves against an unprovoked attack," Chen corrected. "The madness was thinking you could corner the descendants of the species that turned the Ashanti sectors into a graveyard." Admiral Zefkar looked at his tactical displays, seeing them with new eyes. His massive fleet, his overwhelming firepower, his perfect blockade, all of it was suddenly irrelevant. The humans didn't need to fight their way past his ships. They didn't need to win a military victory. They just needed to wait while their enemies starved in the dark. "What would it take to end this?" he asked quietly. "Full withdrawal of all hostile forces from human shipping lanes," Chen replied immediately. formal repudiation of the economic restrictions by the Council, and a recommitment to the Terran Accords as originally written. And if we refuse? Chen's smile turned genuinely sad. Then we'll do what we've always done when threatened with extinction, Admiral. We'll survive, and everyone else won't. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Around them, the most powerful military force in the galaxy sat helplessly in space, slowly realizing that they, 7 days after the human withdrawal began, the Galactic Council convened in emergency session. The great chamber that had once hummed with the confident voices of 1,000 species now echoed with desperation. Delegate after delegate stood to report the same catastrophic news. Their civilizations were collapsing. Ambassador Chen sat in the human section with the same calm expression she had worn throughout the crisis. Her delegation had grown to include Admiral Sarah Reyes, humanity's Chief of Naval Operations, and Dr. Marcus Webb, Director of Colonial Infrastructure. They seemed almost relaxed, as if they were attending a routine trade negotiation rather than watching galactic civilization tear itself apart. Speaker Vorth's crystalline form flickered with stress patterns as they called the session to order. The Council recognizes the urgent nature of this gathering. We have received formal requests for humanitarian intervention from 47 member species. The situation has become untenable. Ambassador Kethvar rose on unsteady legs, his once immaculate robes now disheveled from days of emergency meetings. Dark circles ringed his eyes, and his usual confident bearing had been replaced by barely controlled panic. Honored Speaker, the hegemony formally requests immediate mediation of this crisis. Our colonies are experiencing critical infrastructure failures. Food shortages have begun on 17 worlds. 3 of our major industrial centers have lost primary power. We need human technical support to prevent a humanitarian disaster. A bitter laugh echoed through the chamber. Ambassador Trill of the Merchant Confederation had risen, their bioluminescent patches flashing with bitter irony. Humanitarian disaster? Interesting choice of words from the species that started this war. We didn't start anything, Kethvar protested. We simply proposed economic restrictions. You proposed to strangle our economy and reduce us to a client state, interrupted Admiral Reyes, speaking for the first time since the crisis began. Her voice carried the crisp authority of someone accustomed to command. You threatened military action if we refused to surrender our colonial territories. What did you expect would happen? Dr. Webb activated a holographic display showing the current state of galactic infrastructure. The visual was devastating. Red warning indicators covered nearly half the inhabited systems, showing power failures, supply shortages, and communication breakdowns. The beautiful irony, he said conversationally, is that this situation could be resolved in about 6 hours. Our technical teams are ready to restore full operations to every affected system. Our cargo fleets can be moving critical supplies within a day. Our power engineers can have your grid systems online before the end of the week. Then do it, Kethvar demanded. People are dying. Are they? Chen asked mildly. She consulted her tablet. Our medical facilities report no increase in casualties on human-administered worlds. Our agricultural stations continue feeding approximately 4 billion non-human colonists. Our emergency services have responded to 14 critical situations in the past week, saving thousands of lives. The implication was clear. Humans weren't letting people die. They were simply refusing to maintain the systems that their enemies had taken for granted. The choice before you, Admiral Reyes continued, is quite simple. Withdraw your economic restrictions and military threats, or learn to live without human support. We're comfortable with either option. Comfortable? Sputtered Ambassador Velk of the Morphic Collective. Your own economy is in shambles. Your trade revenue has dropped by 80%. Your people must be suffering terrible hardship. Dr. Webb smiled, and something in that expression made the alien delegates shift uncomfortably. Ambassador, has anyone ever told you about the Great Depression? The holographic display changed to show historical data from Earth's past. Economic statistics, unemployment figures, industrial production charts, all showing a civilization in complete economic collapse. During the 1930s, human civilization experienced a global economic catastrophe. 25% unemployment, massive industrial failures, widespread poverty and hunger. It lasted for years. Do you know what we did? Velk stared at the display in fascination. Your species survived an economic collapse of this magnitude? We didn't just survive it, Webb corrected. We emerged stronger than before. Humans have a peculiar relationship with adversity, Ambassador. Other species seem to view hardship as something to be avoided at all costs. We see it as something that builds character. Chen stood, drawing all attention to her. The current situation is certainly challenging for human colonies. Supply shortages, reduced industrial capacity, disrupted communications, all the things you intended to impose on us permanently. The difference is that we chose this isolation as a defensive measure. We can end it whenever we decide the threat has passed. What threat? Kethvar demanded. We're the ones facing starvation and system failures. Exactly, Chen replied. 600 years ago, the Ashanti made the same mistake you've made. They assumed that because humans appeared weak, we could be safely attacked. They learned otherwise, but only after 17 species had been rendered extinct. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop. Every delegate remembered the historical records Chen had shown them days before, the black zones on the star charts where entire civilizations had once thrived. The threat, Admiral Reyes explained, is the assumption that humanity can be coerced, dominated, or eliminated without consequences. That assumption has proven fatal every time it's been tested. Speaker Vorth's voice carried harmonics of desperation. What do you require to end this crisis? Chen smiled, and for the first time in days, it seemed genuinely warm. The same thing we've required for 500 years, Speaker. Recognition that humanity is a partner in galactic civilization, not a subject to be managed or controlled. She activated her own holographic display, showing the text of the original Terran Accords. Article 7 exists not to give humans special privileges, but to prevent exactly this situation. When the survivors of the Ashanti War wrote those accords, they understood a fundamental truth about human nature. The display shifted to show population statistics, industrial capacity figures, and military strength assessments from across the galaxy. The numbers were sobering. Humanity represented less than 8% of the galactic population, yet their economic and technological contributions were nearly 20 times larger proportionally. We are not the strongest species, Chen continued. We're not the smartest, or the oldest, or the most advanced. But we have one characteristic that makes us uniquely valuable as allies and uniquely dangerous as enemies. Which is? Asked Ambassador Trill, genuinely curious. We refuse to quit, Dr. Webb answered. Other species calculate odds, assess risks, and make rational decisions about when to surrender. Humans keep fighting until either we win or there's nothing left to fight for. That's insane, Velk protested. Yes, Admiral Reyes agreed cheerfully. Completely insane. Which is why the galaxy's oldest rule exists. It's much easier to work with us than against us. Kethvar looked around the chamber, seeing the faces of delegates whose worlds were slowly dying without human support. What are your terms for ending the sanctions? There are no sanctions, Chen corrected. We're simply not doing business with species that have declared economic war against us. But if you'd like to restore normal relations, the terms are simple. The holographic display showed a formal document, a new treaty proposal that looked remarkably similar to the original Terran Accords. Immediate withdrawal of all military forces from human shipping lanes, she read, formal repudiation of the proposed economic restrictions, recognition of human colonial rights as established under the original accords, and a commitment that no future restrictions will be placed on human activities without formal consultation and agreement. That's everything we asked for before, Kethvar said weakly. Plus interest, Admiral Reyes added with dry humor. 7 days of watching your civilizations collapse tends to clarify the terms of negotiation. The vote was unanimous. Even the hegemony delegation, faced with the imminent collapse of their own empire, voted to restore the original terms of human membership in the galactic community. Within hours, human technical teams were working around the clock to restore critical systems across 47 star systems. Cargo ships loaded with emergency supplies began moving toward colonies that had been days away from complete societal breakdown. Power grids that had been dark for a week suddenly blazed with light. Ambassador Chen found herself in an observation lounge aboard the space station, watching the steady stream of human vessels departing for emergency missions throughout the galaxy. Admiral Reyes joined her, carrying 2 cups of coffee, a luxury that had become precious during the crisis. Think they've learned their lesson? Reyes asked, settling into a chair beside her colleague. Chen sipped her coffee, considering the question. For now. But species have short memories, Admiral. In a few generations, someone will forget why the rule exists and decide to test us again. And when they do? Chen's smile was sad but determined. Then we'll remind them. Again. For as many times as it takes. Through the viewport, they could see the lights of human ships spreading across the galaxy like stars being born. Each vessel carried the supplies and expertise needed to repair the damage caused by 7 days of isolation. In the distance, alien vessels waited patiently for permission to resume normal trade relations. You know what the real tragedy is? Chen mused. We actually enjoy working with other species, sharing knowledge, exploring new worlds, building something greater than any of us could create alone. That's what we wanted 500 years ago when we first joined the galactic community. But they keep forgetting that partnership requires trust, Reyes observed. And trust requires keeping your word, Chen agreed. The galaxy's oldest rule isn't really about never betraying humanity. It's about never betraying the fundamental principle that makes civilization possible, that we're all stronger together than we are apart. A communication alert chimed, and Chen activated her personal communicator. The image of Captain Morrison appeared, the same merchant captain who had been denied passage through the blockade 7 days earlier. Ambassador, we've just delivered those medical supplies to the Kepler colony. All 7 children are doing well. Surgery was successful. Chen felt a genuine smile cross her face. Thank you, Captain. How are the colonial authorities treating your crew? Morrison's weathered features crinkled with amusement. Let's just say they're being very polite. Apparently, word has spread about what happens when you mess with human shipping. After the transmission ended, Admiral Reyes chuckled. I love that Captain Morrison held on to those medical supplies for a week, just waiting for clearance to deliver them. She knew we'd win, Chen agreed. The question was never whether we could force them to back down. The question was whether we could do it without becoming the kind of species that Galaxy needs to fear. Through the viewport, the lights of human vessels continued their work, repairing, rebuilding, and restoring the bonds that held galactic civilization together. The crisis was over, but the lesson would endure, carved into the collective memory of 1,000 species who had learned once again that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their willingness to fight. It was their refusal to give up on the dream of a galaxy where different species could work together, despite their differences, to build something worthy of the stars themselves. And anyone who threatened that dream would discover why the rule existed and why it would continue to exist for as long as humans drew breath among the stars, a just-declared war on the species that kept their entire civilization running. In the distance, a single human cargo ship drifted silently through the void, its crew calmly watching the collapse of everything their enemies had built. Or have we simply been very good neighbors because it served our interests? Tell me, Ambassador, in all your planning for this economic blockade, did you consider what might happen if humanity decided to stop being neighborly? For the first time since the session began, Kethvar felt genuine fear. You're threatening the Council? Not at all. I'm simply pointing out that you're about to break the galaxy's oldest rule. What happens next is entirely up to you.